time for Voice of Indie. Your hosts today are Beem Weeks, author, producer, and marketing monster for independent multimedia publisher Fresh Ink Group, and Stephen Gies, author, producer, composer, and publisher for Fresh Ink Group.
Happy Wednesday, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Voice of Indie podcast, episode number 129. I am your host, Beem Weeks, and with me is Stephen Gies. How you doing tonight, Stephen?
I'm doing all right. Sitting here with a bowl of fresh strawberries, and, nothing wrong with that. Went and saw the movie A Man Called Otto last night, starring Tom Hanks, so I'm going to highly recommend it. I'm not going to give it 5 out of 5. I'll go 4.5 out of 5 stars because I think some of the plot points were a bit predictable and whatnot. But, man, Tom Hanks is such a likable guy. So, A Man Called Otto, highly recommend it. We've got an announcement to make about Submariner, Jerry Pate's book. He's offering autographed hardcover copies of it for $40. And if you're interested in having a keepsake collector's edition, hardcover, dust-jacketed, and with a signature, go over to merch.freshinkgroup.com. That's merch, merch.freshinkgroup.com, and order your copy now.
All right. And we do have a new trailer up on the Fresh Ink Group YouTube channel. So go to Fresh Ink Group at YouTube. Just go to YouTube, type in Fresh Ink Group, and look for Maximizing Happiness Through Intimate Communication. This is a book. It's one of the first books that Fresh Ink Group published many, many years ago, and it's by the late Dr. Marshall Scherer, MD, and his wife, Marguerite Scherer, MD, and it helps you get through all of those communication issues that you might have in your relationships and how to build a stronger relationship. So go over there and check it out on YouTube.
Pretty soon we'll be announcing that Glenn M. Plano's new book, Redemption, is coming out and going into pre-sale, so we're working on a trailer for that. We're hoping by early next week or so to have that trailer up, so watch for that as well.
Yeah. If you want to participate tonight in the program and call in with questions or comments to our guest, you can do so by doing this. Okay, so that's not going to work, which means I have to go to my phone and push that button. We're having a little bit of a internet problem tonight over here, and so I'm doing a lot of this on my phone. Here we go.
Call 516-453-9902 right now with your questions or comments for tonight's guest, or post a note on Twitter with hashtag Fresh Ink Group in the body of the tweet, and we'll read it on air. That's 516-453-9902 or hashtag Fresh Ink Group on Twitter.
All right. I was without internet for most of the day today, and it came back on, and it's still kind of sketchy. So we'll get through this. It's going through my phone, and if the internet fails, I can just jump over on the phone. Wouldn't be the first time.
Technology. So a couple of weeks ago, we announced the Robert G. Williscroft 4th edition, a Mac McDowell Mission Series. Operation Whiteout is out, but we were going through the usual couple of weeks of trying to make corrections and fix problems at various retailers and whatnot. From what we can tell, it's out there everywhere now. In fact, there was a ebook edition where we made a correction, and the ebook editions are out there now. Everything should be good to go. You shouldn't have any trouble finding it. If you do, let us know. But that's Operation Whiteout on Mac McDowell Mission by Robert G. Williscroft, Book 4 in the Mac McDowell Submarine Series.
Yeah, and I spent the day working on Operation Whiteout, the audio book, and that's coming along nicely. I knocked out a chapter last night and a chapter today, and today's was fun because some of the sound effects and whatnot that I had to use brought in some new ones to suit the narrative, and just really cool. So Robert will be receiving those pretty soon, and kind of interesting to hear what he's got to say about them.
Yeah. So, another new book out. This is by B.A. Johnson. Sassy uncovers Peter Allen's secret. It's out there in all the editions and all the formats at all the retailers. And from what we can tell, everything seems to be working fine. It's also selling quite well. There was a surge in sales of the first book in her series, Sassy Discovers the AME Church, and then the second book started surging, and right now we're looking at some numbers that are competing with the Herndons, which is kind of nice. So that's Sassy Uncovers Peter Allen's Secret. It's an illustrated children's book, aimed primarily at young people, obviously, but families are reading it, teachers are using it, a lot of adults are using it as well, and it's introducing young people to the AME Church. That's Sassy Uncovers Peter Allen's Secret.
All right. Also, how to start and run your food truck, your own food truck business. It's not your own, but a food truck business in Tennessee. That's out. That's A.K. Wingler. She's also got how to start and run a food truck business in Georgia and in Florida, and more to come. So, food trucks are the big thing today. So, get over there if you want to start one. Get over there and grab one of her books. She'll walk you through it, and it's a pretty in-depth book. So go check it out.
Yeah, those food trucks are popping up all over this North Alabama area. For a while I couldn't even find one. Then there was one or two that started appearing. Now there's half a dozen that are out there in the different places that I drive. They're proving very popular. People are lining up at these. I mean, you're looking across, like I went to a taco truck day before yesterday. Across the street was a Taco Bell with nobody at the drive-thru and nobody going inside, and there was a line at the truck across the street. So that's pretty cool that you got those kinds of options. We've also got another book called How to Teach Driving. Behind the Wheel, Lesson by Lesson by Kenneth Lindquist, and it's actually two books. One is the Parents Edition, one is the Instructors Edition. Parents Edition is for people who want to help their young adults, their teens and young adult children learn how to be better drivers. The Instructors Edition is to help people learn the various skills and what's needed to become certified in the different states around the U.S. And I'm sure that other countries have some kind of requirements for people teaching driver's ed. So that's How to Teach Driving by Kenneth Lindquist. Excellent pair of books.
Yeah, and we do all kinds of website stuff as well. And howtoteachdriving.com is a website that goes along with Kenneth Lindquist's book. So howtoteachdriving.com and how to start and run a food truck business.com, I believe that's the name of that one, is the one that goes with A.K. Wingler's book. So go check for those and leave comments and all that good stuff. All right, we're going to try this again. I'm nervous with these commercials here. We do have a newsletter, and here's how you can sign up and subscribe to it so you know what's going on, everything FIG, everything Indie Author, and find out what's going on with this show.
Stay on top of these podcasts and all things Fresh Ink Group with our weekly digital newsletter. New releases, videos, stories, excerpts, interviews, and more. Sign up now on the homepage of FreshInkGroup.com and be the one who knows what's what.
Well, it's kind of a crapshoot tonight. I'm pushing buttons, and some of them are working, and some of them are not. So, like I said, we'll get through this. It's live, so there you go.
Now, those of you who do receive the newsletter saw that in today's newsletter we had some photos from B.A. Johnson's book signing party that she held this week. Now that we're getting mostly past the pandemic years, our authors are starting to schedule a lot more events out there. Send us some pictures and send us the info in advance so we can help publicize it and try to send some people your way. And then, again, share it in the newsletter and see what you've been up to. All righty. Let's take a look at who's been selling some books this week from Fresh Ink Group. Our tradition now is we've been looking at the top 5 print bestsellers each week. And this week, in the number 1 slot, Shipwrecked and Rescued, The City of Bangor. It has jumped way up there. Wow, some nice numbers here. And that's the book by Larry Jorgensen, which is about the 240 1929 Chryslers that were being shipped across Lake Superior when they shipwrecked in an ice storm. And they wound up having to go back later and try to rescue those cars. It's a very fascinating story. Now, the second book right now, second bestseller, is called Submariner, 30 Years of Hijinks and Keeping the Fleet Afloat. These, only 9 copies behind Shipwrecked right now. So, Submariner is the one I mentioned a minute ago. You can get your autographed hardcover edition if you go to merch.freshinkgroup.com. But Jerry Pate's been having some fun with his book. Number 3 slot, The High Road, Memories from a Long Trip, the memoir by Mark Herndon, who was the drummer for the super country group Alabama for almost 30 years. And we published that book in 2016, and it continues to be one of our perpetual bestsellers all these years later. We also are celebrating the fact that later this weekend, Mark Herndon is being honored in South Carolina at the House of Blues. Is it the House of Blues?
Yeah.
I believe it's the House. Yeah, it's the House of Blues. He's at the House of Blues at Myrtle Beach, and they're going to give him first of all, they're going to induct him into the South Carolina Music Hall of Fame, which is very cool. And then they're going to give him a Lifetime Achievement Award as well. And that's this weekend in Myrtle Beach. And if you're anywhere near there, go check it out. Drop Fresh Ink Group's name. You'll get treated with all kinds of respect by Mark Herndon and his wife's country singer, Leah Seawright. Anyway, that's the number 3 slot, The High Road, Memories from a Long Trip. And next week's guests are Mark and Leah. So we're going to have them on here talking about what their experience was like being inducted into the Hall of Fame. Number 4 slot, the softcover edition of Shipwrecked and Rescued. And then in the number 5 slot, with the same number as Shipwrecked and Rescued, is Sassy Uncovers Peter Allen's Secret by B.A. Johnson. Congratulations, B.A.
Yes. All right. Fantastic. We just had, B.A. Johnson on not too long ago. And if you missed that episode and you've got children who like to read and you want to hear what her book's all about, you can find that episode in the archives. And here's how you can find the archives. All right. Every other one's going to work by the looks of it. So I'm going to go on my phone here.
Just don't ask me to sing.
Yeah, they're not in order on my phone the way they are on the computer, so I have to search for these. Looking for the archive, right? Archive. Where's the archive?
I keep telling you got to get rid of that rotary phone, man.
Yeah. Archive. Where is it at? There it is. All right, here we go.
Find your favorite show in the Voice of Indie archive on YouTube at Fresh Ink Group, StephenGees.com, BeamWeeks.com, FreshInkGroup.com, and on Spotify. And now you can listen on iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, and tune in. Just search The Voice of Indie, all one word.
All right. So, how about we introduce you to tonight's guest? Dr. Robert G. Williscroft is a retired submarine officer, deep sea and saturation diver, scientist, author of numerous books and hundreds of articles, and a lifelong adventurer. He spent 22 months underwater, a year in the equatorial Pacific, 3 years in the Arctic ice pack, and a year at the geographic South Pole. He holds degrees in marine physics and meteorology, and a doctorate for developing a system to protect scuba divers in contaminated water. A prolific author of both nonfiction and fiction. He lives in Centennial, Colorado with his family. Welcome to the show, Dr. Robert G. Williscroft.
Well, thank you very much. That was a real nice introduction. Good thing I wrote it, huh?
Yeah, good thing.
Indeed.
So, Robert, we've had you on the show several times before, so we're not going to ask you all the usual questions because we've got those in the archives. And don't ask Beem to hit the archives button again. It takes too long to figure out which one it is. But let's just do a quick little hit here and start out, where did you go to school and, what was your arc that went from there to winding up in the Navy?
Well, you just asked for a half-hour dissertation.
In 2 minutes.
I went to Germany with my parents in 1950. They had been missionaries in Poland before World War II, escaped by the skin of their teeth, went to Montana thereafter, and as soon as Europe was open enough, they went back in 1950, and I went there with my little sister. I attended Swiss schools, for a little while American military schools, and then spent the rest of my time in German schools, studying all kinds of stuff, including English from a German perspective. I had a terrible time getting a top grade in that. and then I ended up graduating from the Frankfurt American High School in Frankfurt, Germany.
Okay, cool. So,
how did that lead you to the Navy?
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to take an hour of your time. One thing led to another. I ended up living with an uncle in Billings, Montana, going to Montana State University, and a Navy recruiter and an Air Force recruiter grabbed a hold of me. I had decided I wanted to be an astronaut, and the Navy seemed the best route. And then it turned out that my eyes wouldn't qualify me to be a test pilot. And at that time, the early 60s, if you weren't a test pilot, you weren't going to be an astronaut. And so it seemed to me the most interesting alternative was submarines. And so I joined the Navy as an enlisted sonar tech, very much like Jonesy in Hunt for Red October, except for skin color. He and I were pretty much the same. And I eventually received the scholarship to the University of Washington, where I majored in marine physics and meteorology, and then went back into submarine service as a commissioned officer.
Wow. Quite cool. So you're a member of the Adventurers Club now?
Yeah, I was minding my own business several years ago, like about 30, and I got a call from a fellow. I belong to Mensa, which is a high IQ organization. I don't know how the hell I got to be a member, but I somehow managed. And he was a member of Mensa, and he invited me to lunch. And Roger told me about the Adventurers Club, and he said, there's an interesting club that's located here in Los Angeles that's open to people who've lived their lives off the beaten path, and I think you'd be pretty ideal for it. Would you be interested? I went to a meeting, and damned if I wasn't. And so I applied for membership, and they accepted me.
All right. Cool.
So maybe the fact that I agreed to edit their magazine was part of the deal. I don't know for sure.
Great. So, Beem, you want to go ahead and roll our first commercial, and then you say we have a caller already?
We have a caller, so
okay, now everybody, this is the world premiere of the new Mac McDowell Mission Series commercial that covers all 4 books in the series, the latest of which we'll be talking about tonight.
All right, let's see if this works.
If it's the right button.
It's the right button.
Now, from Fresh Ink Group and best-selling author Robert G. Williscroft, the Mac McDowell Mission Series. With a security clearance above top secret, Saturation Dive Team Officer in Charge Mac McDowell leads his team into critical Cold War counter-Soviet missions. Watch Mac prove what brave men can achieve under real pressure, the kind that will steal your air and crush the life out of you. In Operation Ivy Bell, it's the summer of 1972 when Mac and his off-the-books deep-water espionage group are conducting a daring undersea wiretapping operation to gather Russian intel and avert World War. Join nuclear submariner Mac McDowell for extreme diving, a battle with giant squid, and more as he risks everything in the most dangerous operation yet. In Operation Icebreaker, Mac McDowell is leading his submarine team for a mission to lay SOSUS arrays under the Arctic ice when they clash with a highly automated Alpha-class Soviet submarine. Overwhelmed by mechanical problems, the Soviet crew abandons their sub near Point Barrow, Alaska. The skipper launches DSR V-1 Mystic so Mac and his crew can board the empty sub and gather intelligence. The arrival of an even more advanced Soviet sub leads to breathtaking underwater clashes, with the specter of war looming. Will Mac and his crew be sunk by the Soviets, or will they safely return to Alaska, where Mac's new love, Kate, anxiously waits? In Operation Arctic Sting, Mac McDowell and his team capture the abandoned Soviet sub. Piloting their prize through the ice pack to the U.S. East Coast, they must evade or confront other Soviet subs trying to recover the ship or sink it. Breathtaking deep-sea clashes erupt, including hand-to-hand combat with Soviet Morskoy Spetsnaz divers under the ice. Too far from Toothus to escape, the Americans are accosted by a 5-ton orca. Will Mac's ship survive long enough to reach friendly waters, or will the men become just another meal for a deadly whale? In Operation Whiteout, Mac McDowell's Toothus tangles with Argentine subs in the South Atlantic, then confronts a Chi-Com sub off Thurston Island. Escorting a Taiwanese sub, Toothus is attacked by a Chinese Han-class sub and a North Korean AIP sub. Will Mac complete his mission, or will he meet his watery grave on the Pacific's abyssal plain? The McDowell Mission Series by Robert G. Williscroft is available worldwide in jacketed hardcovers, paperbacks, ebooks from Kindle to Nook and Kobo and more, plus exclusive audiobook editions with music and sound effect. The Mac McDowell Mission Series is proudly published by Fresh Ink Group. Take a breath and dive in for thrilling submarine adventures in every Mac McDowell mission.
Yeah, proudly is the key word there. That's a one fine series. We're very proud to have that.
Indeed, and it's a lot of fun doing the working on these audiobooks too. Phone call. You want to take the call?
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna go ahead and just go straight through the phone on this one. And hello, caller, you're on the air. Where you calling from, and what's your name? Hello, caller.
Hello.
Hello.
Are you talking to me?
That's
I'm
you,
talking
Helen.
to you, Dr. Helen. How you doing?
Oh, hi. How are you? Listen, it sounds like a wonderful water world
Yeah.
that Williscroft has invented. It's terrific.
And the one he didn't invent is pretty darn cool too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds very exciting.
Yeah.
Very diverse, also, the writings.
Yep. So you doing okay, Dr. Helen?
No, I'm going
this is
home
Robert.
next Wednesday.
Go ahead, Robert.
Helen, this is Robert. Let me comment that if you were to take any one of the books and look at what was going on with the U.S. Navy during that time in the waters where the action takes place, you would be hard-pressed to find the dividing line between reality and fiction.
Woohoo.
That sounds wonderful.
Yeah, you can look up a lot of this stuff, like Ivy Bells, for example.
Yeah.
Listen, some of reality is fiction,
Yeah.
and vice versa.
now we're talking about politics.
Hey, listen, you missed what I said.
Yeah,
I'm going home next week.
Next Wednesday?
You're going home next week.
On Wednesday.
On Wednesday.
All right.
Fantastic.
Oh, that's cool. I bet you're happy.
Well, yeah, I'm not in the greatest of health, so to speak, but lying here in bed with my books and papers in the bed, that ain't a way to live.
No, it's not.
So let's see what happens when I get there. But
Yeah.
anyway, keeping me alive has been this weekly soiree. But I think Williscroft stuff, it sounds just wonderful. And I'm going to have to dive into it.
I'm an old science fiction fan, especially Robert Heinlein, so his science fiction books are right in my wheelhouse. They're exactly the kind of science fiction stories I like.
I'm going to read Williscroft because the advertisement tells me that it's very exciting.
Yeah, very much. All right, well, thanks for calling, Helen. Check back in with us, and good luck on the trip home. I hope that all works out well for you.
Yes.
Thank you for hanging in there, and I'm listening
to
all your wonderful writers and you wonderful publishers and editors.
All right, well, we hope you stay on the line, Helen.
Okay.
Thanks a lot, Helen.
I am listening.
All right. We got on Twitter here, Verwayne Greenhouse says, I'm here. I got a call just as the show went live, but he's here. Robert Williscroft is an extremely interesting guest. I'm glad to be here. Well, thank you, Mr. Greenhouse.
All right.
We appreciate having you there.
I wasn't seeing that. I hadn't clicked on latest. Those of you who are following us on Twitter, make sure you hit that latest tab to see the tweets as they actually come up. Every now and then I forget to click that, and I'm sitting here kind of lost looking at older tweets. Yeah. But
now, Robert, with all of this adventurous background that you had and eventually retiring, how did you get into writing? You know, have you been writing your whole life, and what led you to writing the stories that you do write?
Do you know the name John Campbell Jr.?
Oh, yeah. Father of science fiction.
When I was a teenager, I sent an absolutely terrible science fiction story to John. And he had the decency to write me back and say, you know, kid, this isn't quite publication quality. In fact, it isn't even close, but I can see that you got talent, so keep it up.
Oh, cool. You still have that letter?
Somewhere, I'm sure.
Yeah, wow, that'd be a nice autograph to have, if nothing else. Because Campbell was considered the father of science fiction in many ways, because he was the guy who was most involved in getting some of the great early science fiction authors' work out there, and basically turning the genre into a serious genre, as opposed to used to be kid stuff before that.
Robert Heinlein walked into his offices, and on all four walls were printing sheets laying out all of the stories and the novels that Heinlein had written to that point. And Campbell pointed out to him, you got a gap here, you got a gap here, there's an inconsistency here, you need to fill these in. And he got Robert Heinlein organized to the point where he became what he became.
Yeah. Yeah, and Robert went on to publish what he called his future history, which is a collection of his stories and novels in a way that basically tell the history of the future. Very fascinating. And, you know, after all this time, too.
Just to continue the story of publication, when I did my dissertation, the title was a system for protecting scuba divers from the hazards of contaminated water. And I did it while I was working with NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, in their diving division. And NOAA picked up the dissertation as something that would really be useful to port captains around the world, and they published the dissertation in hardbound and sent it to port captains everywhere. So that was my first published book. Wow. I go back and look at it now, you know, and every second or third page I find an error, a typo or something. It's pretty embarrassing. But that was my first published, and things kind of went from there.
Where did they go from there? What was your second?
Yeah. What was your second one?
Well, I wrote several diving books. They were programmed instruction texts that were keyed to the various diving organization textbooks that were available out there, NAUI and PADI and YMCA and the Los Angeles Diving Group, and it was keyed to them and made learning the theoretical side of diving made learning it a lot easier. And I published both a basic diver and an advanced diver on that. And then I got a commission to just publish a book through the U.S. Diver magazine, and that was cool. And then somehow, a total surprise to me, I got a phone call, and the Washington Scuba Diver Council told me that I had been selected as the Scuba Diver of the Year for Washington State, which came as a big surprise, but it's kind of fun to put on my resume.
Yeah, wouldn't have known there was such a thing.
After that, when I retired, I moved to a small town in eastern Washington, and I had an office downtown, and people knew that I had spent some time at the South Pole and had done some other things. So I was kind of a bit of a celebrity in town. And a couple times a week, one of the ranchers, there were wheat ranchers and asparagus ranchers and other types surrounding the town, Dayton, Washington, they'd come up and drop a newspaper on my desk and say, "Hey, Robert, what the hell is this?" And I'd look at it. You know something? The rancher was right. It was a bunch of BS. And so I started writing a column called the Thrawn Rickle, which is Old Scottish for a loose, dilapidated heap. And anyway, it got picked up and syndicated around the Pacific Northwest. Basically, I explained the headlines, either why they were right, but here's how it works, but more often why they were wrong, and here's why they're wrong. And I ended up consolidating those columns into a book called The Chicken Little Agenda, Debunking Experts' Lies, and experts was in quotes. That became a bestseller, and that was cool. And the publisher earned all the money. I didn't get much from it. Even when I hired a publicist, the publisher earned more money. I got to pay the publicist back, and there wasn't much left over. But anyway, I decided that the next book I published, I would do it myself. And the next book I did was Operation Ivy Bells.
Wow.
And that became an international bestseller. Whoop-de-doo. And I got all the profits, so that was pretty cool.
Yeah,
well,
definitely.
my next question on that is, what motivated you to make the jump from nonfiction to fiction?
I had always wanted to tell the story of my participation in Operation Ivy Bells, but it was highly classified, and I couldn't do it.
Okay,
and then a book came out called Blind Man's Bluff. And Blind Man's Bluff basically laid it all out so that it didn't matter anymore whether there was classified material or not, and I decided to go ahead and write the story. I put a disclaimer in the book. I changed the names of people. I kind of combined different people so that the actual individuals are figments of my imagination, but they're made up from several different people that I actually worked with and that I actually dove with. Hey, it was sort of, I would call it semi-autobiographical with fictional elements put into it.
Wow, cool.
Did you find it more difficult or easier to write fiction versus nonfiction, or was it about the same?
It was a first-person narrative, and I've always been pretty good at sitting down in a bar over a beer and telling a story.
Okay.
Great. So
we have another.
We've
got another caller. Yeah.
I was going to say, why don't we roll two commercials back to back? All of our commercials tonight are for Robert G. Williscroft books. So we're going to learn more about his books. But let's go ahead and knock out two and then take our caller.
Okay. Let me take a look at here where we're at. The next one is going.
Whatever one's next.
All right. I see that. We'll do that.
Introducing Book 1 in the new series by master sci-fi storyteller Robert G. Williscroft, Icicle, a Tensor Matrix, the first Oort Chronicle. Dying of prostate cancer, wealthy entrepreneur Braxton Thorpe is frozen in hopes of someday being revived and cured. That's when he discovers a threat to the entire solar system. But he has a problem. He's dead. He awakens to find himself uploaded into an electronic matrix. Exploring beyond the matrix and the larger global net, he discovers the Oort, a distributed electronic entity older than humanity, with an unnerving secret. Aliens wiped out nearly all life on Earth once, and they are coming back to do it again. The mathematical entity that is Thorpe has to find a way to convince humans of this threat, and in time to do something about it. But how? And what? Will Thorpe's carefully assembled team have any shot at saving the world? Will the Russians and Chinese help or betray? And who uploaded the cat? Icicle, a Tensor Matrix, the first Oort Chronicle, is available worldwide in hardcover, softcover, all ebook formats, and now as an audiobook narrated by Trenton Bennett, including music and sound effects. Icicle, a Tensor Matrix, is proudly published by Fresh Ink Group. Now, from science fiction master Robert G. Williscroft, the Oort Federation, to the stars, the second Oort Chronicle. As the Oort Federation becomes a major force in the solar system, Braxton Thorpe passes the Federation chairmanship to former U.S. President John Butler. Thorpe's group offers humanity virtual immortality, but Isidore Orlov and his Udachny enterprises oppose their every move. While Thorpe's group terraforms Mars for more living space, the Mars Reds prove formidable as resistors. If the Asterian Starship fighter pilots are released, will they align with Phoenix or Udachny? And who will develop the right FTL technology? In this tense space adventure, Thorpe, his team, and Max the Tabby Cat travel to Proxima Centauri and beyond to the Aster system, 84 light years distant. Will Thorpe bring together humans and Asterians in their quest for intergalactic travel? Will long life prove more than mere humans can handle? Grab Icicle, a tensor matrix, the first Oort Chronicle, and continue the journey with the Oort Federation to the stars. Proudly published in all print, digital, and sensory-enhanced audiobooks by Fresh Ink Group.
All right.
A pair of fine books, the first two books in the Oort Chronicles series, and I'll bet there's a third one coming out sometime in the next year or two. We'll have to wait and see.
Yeah. All right, let's go ahead and go to the phones here and take this call. Hello, caller. You're on the air. What's your name and where are you calling from?
I'm calling from Mammoth Lakes, California. My name is Captain Jim Goodrich. I also happen to be a... Well, thank you. Your audience might like to know, as well as you, that I'm losing my podcast virginity tonight.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
I've never called into a podcast. I've never been part of any podcast. And but when I told friends and colleagues the last couple of days that I was going to enjoy this one because I know Robert. We're both members of the Adventurers Club of Los Angeles. Everybody I know except me, I think I'm the last holdout on this quadrant of the universe to finally succumb to a podcast. And I've enjoyed it so far.
Fantastic. That's good to hear.
So one of the things that kind of piqued my interest especially was when Robert was explaining that the distinction, in my own words, between, history's timeline, the actual history, and his fictional account of events during that same period would be hard to differentiate. And that's a tough one. The difference, and I'm a budding writer. The difference between Robert's ability to do this and mine is that he didn't have to change the names to protect the guilty.
Yeah.
All right.
This is fun. I'm having a blast. I'll tell you. Robert has been a great mentor on this journey of my own, and I'm hoping to become part of the stable at some point. But I think that is going to be decided on the merits of the writing.
Well, do you have a wild, crazy story involving Robert that you want to share? Being an adventurer?
Well, not above and beyond the fact that I know his CV and I admire him, and the fact that he has taken time out. We're both adventurers and have spent pretty much an entire adult lifetime on the adventure trail. But the fact that he's taken the time to coach me and lend a helping hand and point me in the right direction, I just admire him, and I think that needs to be acknowledged.
Oh, that's cool. Well, Captain, I've been looking at your book for the past week, all the old pictures and stories about being a child actor and all that kind of stuff, too. So let me tell you how it works. If and when Fresh Ink Group publishes your book, you get invited to be the featured guest on the podcast. Then Robert can call in and harass you.
Well, I tell you, that sounds like more fun than happen in one setting. Is it legal? They have that much fun?
Sometimes. In some states it's not.
It still is. Okay, this is good.
If it's not, it'll be Alabama
Robert,
where it's not.
Jim, this is Robert. If it's legal, you couldn't possibly be interested in it.
Yeah.
No doubt. But, we've all matured and moved on to other things. And, sometimes some of us have a story that absolutely needs to be told, whatever the results are. So there you have it. But thank you so much for taking my call. Robert, I'm just enjoying this. Thanks for inviting me on and to call in, and I really appreciate you and the Fresh Ink Group. You guys are something else.
Thank you.
Well, thanks a lot,
Thank you for the kind words, and let me make a quick comment about the blending of fiction and reality. In Operation Whiteout, for example, in 1989, there was a major Pacific Navy exercise between the navies of all of our allies. It was called PAC-X-89, and it covered the Pacific. And this was perhaps a little bit by design, the time frame that the story Operation Whiteout was taking place in. And so there were several incidents within PAC-X that were, at least from the public perspective, unexplained, and I incorporated those incidents into the story in such a way that unless you actually participated on the ship and were there, you'd be really hard-pressed to say, okay, fiction stops here and reality starts.
Wow.
Fantastic.
Yeah, no, it's engaging.
All right. Well, thank you for taking the time to call in and to listen as well, Captain.
Yeah.
Well, you got my undivided attention. I'm the super glue on my haunches is intact on the chair, and I'm not moving until this is over.
All right, there we go.
All right.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Yep.
All right. Have a good evening.
You too.
All right.
All right, so Robert, a little known fact about me is that my favorite chicken is KFC. I like Church's. I like Popeyes. I like all these others that they got around here. Bojangles is pretty good, but KFC is as good as it gets. I just can't afford to buy it very often. And it's also no secret that my favorite critter is the octopus. In fact, the logo for Fresh Ink Group is a blue octopus. So I'm looking for somebody who can tell me some kind of a story about an octopus and KFC in the same story. Got one?
Okay. Who put you up to this?
Just random
All
thoughts.
right, let me tell you the story. It's kind of interesting. Puget Sound is known for interesting critters, and among other things, it has some very large, giant octopus that occupy the northern stretches of Puget Sound, and we spent a lot of time diving and training advanced divers with NOAA in Puget Sound. I was in charge of all of NOAA diving operations throughout the Pacific with headquarters in Seattle. So it was a convenient place to go, and there was always something new to do to take these advanced divers out to. And we were out one particular weekend and in water that was several hundred feet deep, but against a cliff, perhaps 100 feet below the surface, maybe 75, we discovered this octopus. Before she inked us, we figured out it was a female. Between us, we determined that from tentacle tip to tentacle tip, she stretched about 20 feet.
Wow.
That's huge. She inked us, and once you're inked, the water is impenetrable. She doesn't do that. Octopuses don't do that to attack. They do that so you can't find them and attack them. So we left. But I was just totally curious about it. So I and a couple of the instructors, went back the following weekend, and we had brought with us some Kentucky Fried Chicken, one of the boxes that has 20 pieces in it. And on a lark, I took a piece with me and stuck it in a pocket in my wetsuit. We got down there. She was still there, and she inked us again. but I let the current pull the ink away, and then I started approaching her with this Kentucky Fried Chicken leg, a drumstick in my hand. And they're very sensitive. They're smart, and the smells penetrate the water. And she reached out with one of her tentacles and took it from me and ate it. Well, that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Well, the next day we decided, let's investigate this a little bit. So we brought out another batch of Kentucky Fried Chicken, but this time when she reached for it, I didn't give it to her. I started swimming right for her. And I got up. Her carapace was about 5 feet tall, 4.5 feet, something like that. Pretty big, great big eyes, and down at the bottom she had the beak. And since she wasn't inking me, and apparently she didn't see me as a threat, and I had that really tasty morsel in my hand, she let me put it right into her beak.
Wow!
Wow! Was that ever amazing?
Yeah,
and
they're
so
protective
for
of their underside.
days after that, we went back every day. We fed her. She became very friendly. You know, we could get right up, snuggle up to her, pet her. It was a remarkable experience.
Wow. Yeah, I love octopuses, and you know, you mentioned about how they ink. They blow out that ink, which kind of blinds their predator, and at the same time creates something floating in the water while they're getting away. They're going the other direction. And the predator's still looking at that little blotch of ink, wondering where they went. That's what Fresh Ink is, Fresh Ink Group. It's, in fact, our earliest logos were an octopus blowing ink onto paper in the water, onto pages in the water. So now you've got a history of Fresh Ink you never heard of. But, yeah, octopuses are smart. They're great. I did a dive in Cozumel, Mexico one time, and the dive master asked me, what is it you want to see? And I said, I'm looking for octopus. So he said, I'll introduce you to Betty. So he took everybody on the boat and cut up some squid and had each of us put a little piece of squid somewhere on our body, in our pocket, or something like that. And then we went down Torremolinos Reef, and when we got to where Betty was, he summoned her out of her hole, and she came up, glommed onto him, looked him right in the eye. I mean, she's right in front of his face mask, looking him in the eye, and those tentacles were exploring his body, checking all of his pockets and stuff while she's looking at him. Just acting like, oh, I'm not doing anything. What's going on here? And until she found that morsel. And if we one at a time went up there and checked her out, she'd jump onto us, look us in the thing, and find that little piece of squid. So they're pretty cool.
How about, since we're talking about food in the water, what's the deal with the moray eel that likes hot dogs?
Yeah. And are they chili dogs?
Do you know where Penny Camp Reef is in the Florida Keys?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
There. Many times.
I've never been there, but
for the listeners who aren't aware, Penny Camp Reef is a protective game preserve. You cannot fish, you cannot spearfish, you cannot hunt. All you can do is take pictures. And the fish seem to have figured that out. When you go to Penny Camp Reef, you're surrounded by tens of thousands of fish all over the place. There was I was a part of a party that was taking 100 divers for their first open water dive, and I had not met this moray eel before, but the guy who was the lead instructor told us about it, and he said, this moray eel really likes hot dogs, and you can have a lot of fun with it. So, in about 60 feet of water, I had just a couple of students with me, and down on the bottom we could see the nose of the fish sticking out of a hole. Well, as the moray eel realized there were some people there, she came out fully 6 feet long, and she hung in the water in front of me with her body straight like mine was. I was vertical, and her head twisted so that her snout was pointed at me and her tail was twisted away so that she looked kind of like an elongated S. And then she came up to me and she tapped my face mask with her beak.
Wow.
Now, moray eels are fish, so they're constantly opening their mouths to flush water through their gills. And the mouths are filled with teeth, and the teeth are angled backwards so that if she takes a bite, the only way you're going to get out of it is for her to bite off whatever it is she's bit.
Yep.
So I was a bit leery, but she seemed friendly enough, and in my pocket I had a hot dog. And I pulled the hot dog out after she tapped me a couple of times, indicating she wanted to be fed. And being careful not to let my fingers be confused with the hot dog, I laid the hot dog in the water and pulled my fingers back, and she snapped it up right away and swallowed it. And then she tapped my face mask again. She wanted another hot dog.
Oh.
And so we did this a couple of times, and then I let the students do it. A remarkable, absolutely remarkable experience from a moray eel that was bigger than me.
Wow.
Wow.
And you had an octopus that was way bigger than you, too.
Yeah.
Well, what about Humboldt squids? You had any experience with them?
Oh my goodness! Here we go. You've been talking to somebody. Humboldt squids are amazing critters. They are, well, the ones that I and let me interrupt myself. I start out Operation Ivy Bells. The first chapter describes in detail an encounter with 3 Humboldt squid at 1,000 feet on helium. Now I've dove with Humboldt squid wearing special male armor over the top of my dry suit so that they couldn't penetrate my dive suit. The Humboldt squid that I dove with off of Baja California, off the coast of Baja California, come up from 1,000 to 2,000 feet to the surface to feed at night. They're 6 to 8 feet long. They have vicious teeth all around their suckers, and their eyes are as big as a squid, as a octopus's eyes. But these guys are way smarter than octopuses. They remember in Jurassic Park how the raptors coordinated their attacks with sounds.
Yeah.
Well, it turns out that Humboldt squid coordinate their attacks with color. Now, if you go on the internet and look it up, an awful lot of articles by erudite scientists will tell you that they've got 3 colors. Well, that ain't true. They got 20, and they can communicate in detail. And I've been under attack by 3 carefully coordinated Humboldt squid, and the only reason I survived was I had a Kirby Morgan helmet on, and I had male armor over the rest of my body.
Wow.
Wow.
That sounds like an adventure there.
Yeah. Their ability to change colors is always fascinating.
If you read the first chapter of Operation Ivy Bells, it gives you a very good sense of what took place.
Oh, that's cool. I was one time in Bonaire. I was shooting underwater video at night and came across a giant cuttlefish. They're about 3 feet, maybe a little bit more when they're full grown, and he was in the process of trying to hook up with his girlfriend, and he saw me as a threat. And then I was like trying to step in on him or whatever. So he put on a show that was phenomenal. I got every bit of it on video. I mean, he's waving his fins around and undulating colors, putting bright red flashes at me and stuff like that. All with these chromatomes in his skin. And man, that's just amazing what they can do. But
it really
is. The video for the book has a shot of a Humboldt squid in it. So people should go check out that video, shouldn't they?
Yes, they should.
Yeah.
All right, we do have a phone call. You guys want to take another caller?
Yeah.
All right. Hello, caller. You're on the air. What's your name and where are you calling from?
Good evening. This is Jerry Pate, author of
Jerry.
Submariner.
Hey.
Welcome to the show, Jerry.
Yeah. Well.
Hey, Jerry. Nice to hear from you.
I bet it is. I know where all of Robert's bodies are buried. So, what he failed to mention about the octopus and the Kentucky Fried Chicken was the third time he went down, the octopus had written a note, "I would like some red beans and rice, please." And I just wanted to publicly thank Robert on the air for everything he and his wife Jill have done for me. As Gary knows, or sometimes known as Stephen, as Gary knows, I have a TBI, and as a result, I have minimal reading comprehension. So I have had to rely on Dr. Bob, as I call him, many times to interpret emails that I get from different outfits and basically explain to me what the heck they're after. And of course, being my former division officer, and as he said earlier, he was a submarine sonar tech, and so was I. And he was the diver, and so was I. But I graduated from the Lloyd Bridges School of Diving that came on every Wednesday afternoon about 4 o'clock on television. He was diving in Silver Springs. So, but I did go to Navy Diver School. But he has been just phenomenal. Like the captain called earlier, he's been phenomenal in helping me. His wife, Jill, has done a super job in getting my book straightened out, or I should say my stories, their book. But I just want everybody to know that I can echo everything the captain said earlier, and I really I would not be where I am as far as in the book publishing or writing business as I am now. So,
hey, Jerry, let me jump in a second to tell the
no,
listening
you be
audience
quiet, stay in your corner.
A little anecdote.
I have to listen to you.
I was on Jerry's mailing list, email list, and I was getting a series of stories about his experiences in submarines and elsewise. And I wrote him back and I said, Jerry, you're a terrific writer and you've got a book here. And he said, you're kidding me. There's not enough material for a book. Well, as you guys know, Beem and Gary, the book is over 100,000 words.
Yeah, 60 chapters.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was something I wrote for my sons, 4 sons, and my 8 grandchildren. That's why it's not XXX rated. And I left all that stuff out. But anyway, I just wanted to publicly thank Robert and any of your audience members that are listening that he has been not only my former division officer, but he has been an outstanding friend and has guided me step by step through this whole process. And there aren't too many people that you can praise as much as I have given him and his wife, Jill. Which I think Jill's in charge. He just kind of lives there and signs the check. So, all right. I'll leave you guys alone.
Thanks, Jerry.
Yes,
yeah,
sir.
thanks for calling, Jerry.
You bet. Bye.
So, Beem, we've got a couple more commercials. Do you want to run 2 back-to-back? I believe one of them will be Submariner. Jerry just brought up.
Okay, let's see if we can't find it over here. Will it work this time? No, it won't. So we'll have to go over here and do it. Here we go.
In Daedalus, Navy SEAL Derek Tiger Bailey, irreverent member of the SEAL's Winged Insertion Command, makes a harrowing first base jump in the experimental Griffin 7 hard-shell wingsuit from the edge of space. He test flies the armor-plated Griffin 10 in Daedalus LEO, catapulting into space by slingshot and dropping from a record-obliterating 160 clicks. Testing the enhanced Griffin 10 MK4 in Daedalus Squad, Bailey's 6-man team believes it is fully prepared for hurtling around the world and staging critical re-entry, but challenged to innovate life-or-death solutions with only seconds to spare. It might not survive intact. Then the presidential frontrunner is seized by pirates for ransom in dataless combat, and the SWIC team is called to action, where it must literally improvise on the fly with everything to lose. Join Tiger Bailey through all 4 adventures in Sci-Fi Master Robert G. Williscroft's Daedalus series, now collected for the first time as the Daedalus Files, SEALs Winged Insertion Command, SWIC.
Submariner, 30 years of hijinks and keeping the fleet afloat. Jerry Pate's semi-autobiographical collection of 60 stories recounts his 30 years in and around the U.S. Navy submarine fleet, ranging from lighthearted to wrenching. All are poignant inside looks at naval operations rarely seen by outsiders. Topics include the real story behind the shuttle Challenger tragedy, risking his own life underwater, discovering a Soviet spy living across the street, surviving when an engine ignites, critical missions, and the everyday lives of men and women of the fleet. Compiled by author Robert G. Williscroft and proudly published by Fresh Ink Group. Submariner is available worldwide in hardcover, softcover, and all ebook formats. Dive into Submariner for hijinks and breathtaking adventure with this poignant memoir by a true American hero.
Go out and grab a copy, everybody. Now, speaking of hijinks, what's this about playing poker in Scotland?
Yeah.
Great.
Oh my goodness. When I was a young officer serving on the von Steuben, in fact, it was the time when Jerry Pate and I served together. I was his division officer when this incident took place. I enjoyed going to town, sort of at the near the ocean edge of Holyloch in Scotland, a town called Dunoon. It was kind of a vacation resort for Scotlanders. Anyway, there was a casino in the town, and they had a poker table, and I enjoyed. This is back when people played poker, not Texas Hold'em, which I consider to be a children's game. Anyway, this was real poker. The deal would pass around the table, and the house would take a cut from every pot. And I when I went there, I usually did fairly well, but on one particular evening, I was just losing my shirt, and it was really an unpleasant circumstance for me. I didn't have all that money to start with, and what little I had for recreation was quickly evaporating. Well, there was a fella, a newcomer to the game, who was sitting across the table from me. The poker table was a round table, and there were 7 of us at the table, and he was dealing, and as he shuffled the cards and passed it for a cut and then picked it up, I happened to notice what the bottom card was. It wasn't done on purpose, and it just happens sometimes in poker. And he dealt the cards around, and I picked up my 5 cards, and guess what? That bottom card was in my hand. And the light came on. I understood why I had been losing. Now, I'm in a foreign country, in a foreign city, at a table with a bunch of guys who were tough poker players and considered me to be the outsider Yank. So I quietly thanked them for the game, laid my cards down on the table, and walked out of that casino.
Wow.
Imagine that.
So what's the wedding in Scotland?
The hotel that I was at, where the casino was, I was there shortly after Nat King Cole had passed away. There was a reel-to-reel tape recorder on the bar, and the barmaid was playing Nat King Cole music, and we were kind of commiserating about his passing. The bar was almost entirely empty, and the auditorium had a wedding going on. Suddenly the door of the auditorium opened up, and this Scot at the time, I thought he was an older guy. Probably now I would think he was a younger guy. But anyway, he came walking dressed in full regalia, the kilt, the split calf socks, the tam o' shanter on his head, and he had a walking stick. And he walked up to the bar, and he said to the barmaid, "I'll have a whiskey, lass." And smiling at him, she reached back for one of the expensive single malts that he had on the back shelf, and he scowled at her and said, "I didn't say Scotch, lass, I said whiskey. Give me a bourbon." And then he turned around, put his elbows on the bar, and absolutely dared anybody to challenge him.
Wow.
Fantastic. So how about, you tell us a little bit about your latest book, Operation Whiteout.
The previous books, Operation Ivy Bells tells the story of the tapping into Soviet underwater communications cables. Operation Icebreaker tells the story of laying acoustic arrays called SOSUS arrays in the Arctic ice pack looking north to detect south-coming Soviet submarines. Operation Arctic Sting describes capturing an abandoned high-tech Soviet titanium submarine and shepherding it under the ice pack to the U.S. East Coast while Soviet subs are doing their best to either capture it or sink it. During this whole time, we had a good acoustic network looking north between Europe and Iceland, between Iceland and Greenland, between Greenland and the Arctic archipelago, and under the ice pack itself. But what we didn't have were any arrays down south looking north into the Atlantic and the Pacific. Operation Whiteout tells the story of laying of 2 arrays in the South Atlantic and 1 in the South Pacific right along the shores of Antarctica itself. And it isn't just an adventure story of laying underwater acoustic arrays, although that can be pretty exciting all by itself. But they discover a Taiwanese oil operation off the coast of Antarctica. During this period, the late 1980s and going into the 90s, we had stopped recognizing Taiwan as China and had recognized the Red China as the official China. And Taiwan was really getting the short end of the stick. Among other things, she was short on oil. And my people, the Toothus and Mac and his crew, stumble onto this Taiwanese oil operation using a large submarine tanker to transport oil from the southern Pacific all the way up to Taiwan. And due to circumstances, they end up being tasked with escorting the Taiwanese effort to Taiwan right through PAC-X-89, this huge Pacific marine exercise by 7 or 8 associated countries, allies of the United States. And it just becomes a huge adventure. Borisco, the orca whom was first encountered in Icebreaker and then again in Arctic Sting, plays a significant role and eventually helps to ensure the success of the operation.
Now,
so you got a 5th one in mind already?
Say again?
Do you have a 5th book in mind already? You know where we're going next?
Oh, yes, I do. In fact, at the end of Operation Whiteout, Mac is assigned as the commanding officer of the USS Toothus and reads his orders to the crew. They're going to be transiting back around South America and over to the waters off of South Africa about 10 years before this operation takes place, there was an event between South Africa and Israeli forces, where they detonated a small nuclear device in the waters off of South Africa. It was called Operation Vela. This is real. It really happened. And Toothus has been assigned to go down to the area where this took place, because there are indications that the South Africans are developing a suitcase nuke. And so the book will be entitled Operation Vela Redux.
Ooh.
And they will be investigating that, and all kinds of things will be happening, of course.
Cool.
Again, tying in fictional events with real events in such a way that you'd be hard-pressed to separate one from the other.
Yeah, and that's great for the authenticity and the verisimilitude, because a lot of people who like these kinds of books, they want the authenticity there. They don't want to sound like somebody in Hollywood who has no idea how to run a submarine is making things up.
Yeah, where you get the scene, the guy's looking out the window of the submarine and he decides to roll down the window and pet the fish.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just yesterday, I was watching a movie where somebody said, "over and out." It just gritted my teeth.
What do they say? Just over?
Over or out.
Or out, right.
Out is the end of the conversation. Over means you're transmitting and you're expecting something back from the other guy. Over and out is kind of like saying, well, it's BS. It's never used.
Yeah, it's kind of like saying I'm expecting an answer back, but I'm done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we're starting to run short on time here. Maybe we could slip in a story about sharks at the equator before we start to wrap up.
You have been I know who you've been talking with. There's only one person who knows all this stuff. Okay.
It was a moray eel that liked hot dogs that told us these stories.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, I got it. I was on the NOAA ship Oceanographer at the time. We were surveying the floor of the Pacific near the equator to see whether or not mining manganese nodules would be economically feasible. What we would do is to drop a box core 5 kilometers to the bottom. It would slam into the bottom, and then a plate would close across the bottom and across the top, and whatever was captured would be brought to the surface, and then we could count the numbers of manganese nodules that were in this square meter of ocean bottom and get some sense of the density of these things. And it was an interesting exercise. So we're down there. We had put a buoy in the water that was anchored to the bottom with Kevlar rope and a couple of railroad wheels. And after we got it installed and backed away from it, we discovered that it wasn't working. Well, you can't. The ocean's a dynamic surface. It's moving all the time. You can't put a technician on this buoy and have him try to figure out why it's not working, because he's bounced all over the place and just be thrown in the water. So we had the option of either pulling the whole darn thing up and then repairing it on the ship, which would take a whole day, and this would cut seriously into the scientific budget of the project manager who was on the ship. Well, I went to the captain and said, "Hey, I got an idea. How about if we take myself and another diver and we go out there and we dive down below the buoy and we just cut the Kevlar cable. It's just Kevlar. It's going to come out of their budget than the railroad wheels, but that's way less money than what a whole day's operation would cost them." He talked with the chief scientist. That was a good idea, and so he said, "Go ahead." Well, I went to the chief cook and asked him if he had a brand new bread knife, and he said, "Well, I do." And I said, "I need to borrow it." He says, "Do I get it back?" And I said, "I hope so." So yeah. I had this brand new, never been used serrated bread knife with a blade about 12 inches long, and the other diver on the ship was a young NOAA officer whom I had trained personally. He was one of my students, so he was having fun diving with the guy who taught him. You know, that's a fun experience for a fella. And we climbed down the side of the boat into a Zodiac, and we had a coxswain with us, and we headed out. We were about a mile or so from the buoy, and we headed out across a really beautiful Pacific surface with gentle waves, maybe 4 or 5 feet, but not just very gentle. And the sky was azure blue, and about halfway, and the crews, they're lined along the ship's side, and you can hear the voices clearly as they're talking to each other. They're saying, these guys are getting paid extra for this? There's something wrong. And then, out of nowhere, from all directions, shark fins started cutting through the water. I'm not talking 1 or 2. I'm talking hundreds of Pacific grays. These guys are aggressive. They're not easy to deal with. They're curious, and it was just I wasn't looking forward to getting into the water with these. And you could have heard a pin drop across the ocean alongside on the ship, and no more. These guys are getting paid extra for this stuff. And so I said to the diver who was with me, I said, look, if you want to go back, he said, we can do it, and nobody's going to blame you. And just then, he had to have been young, a young shark came up. Remember, we're in a Zodiac. It's got tubes filled with air. Is what's keeping it afloat. And this little shark, about 6-7 feet long, comes popping up and slams his nose into the side of the Zodiac. And I'm thinking, geez, if he has his jaws open when he does that, we're going to be in the water. So he backed off. He bounced off, and he backed off, curious. He had to have been young, and an older shark wouldn't have done that because they would have figured it out. So I took an oar, and the next time he came, I slammed the oar into his snout, and that hurt him. And he flipped away, and when he did that, the other sharks backed off a little bit, kind of curious as to what was going on. And we got to the buoy. The buoy is moving up and down. Well, the buoy is not moving up and down. The waves are passing it because the buoy was hooked to the bottom with the Kevlar cable. Anyway, I said, look, you don't want to go in. That's okay. You can stay here and be my standby diver. And he looked at me and he says, you got my back? I said, sure. So what we did, I gave him a bang stick. That's a long stick about 1.5 yards long that has a cartridge at the end, a 45 slug, and a bunch of CO2. So you stick it onto a shark and you pull the trigger and it fills the shark with CO2 and it goes to the surface, and hopefully the other sharks will eat it and leave you alone. That's the theory anyway. And so we got in the water. I got out my serrated bread knife, and we dropped down to 100 feet back to back. You could see the sharks. The visibility clear, 200-300 feet, just amazing visibility. And you could see the sharks out there kind of circling around and keeping an eye on us. And I stretched out as far as I could. I didn't know what would happen when I started cutting the cable. And I started sawing through this taut Kevlar cable, and about halfway through, it just parted. And the bottom half headed toward the bottom, leaving a trail of bubbles behind it. And we swam up underneath the buoy, and now it's floating on the surface, moving with the waves. And we climbed inside the gridwork to protect ourselves a little bit from the sharks, because when they heard that noise, they closed back in to take a look at what was going on. And I waved the Zodiac over, and we managed to get back into the Zodiac. Never did know what happened to the young shark who was bumping our gunnels. And we headed back to the ship as heroes for 15 minutes.
Oh, cool. Now, I do have a manuscript here submitted by Ralph A. Shark about how being attacked one time down in the equator, so that could be him.
Ralph A.
So, Robert, we like to ask people to offer advice to independent writers out there. You got any?
Oh, I've always got advice, Gary. You know that.
Yeah.
Yeah. if you are writing your first book, don't quit. No matter how discouraged you get, no matter how difficult it is, keep writing. There is no such thing as writer's block. That's just BS.
It is.
I agree.
If you don't feel like writing, write anyway. Every day. Spend 15, 20 minutes, at least, a couple hours maybe. And here's something to seriously consider. Publishing has totally changed. Traditional publishing with a big traditional publisher, and he gives you an advance, and then he keeps all the money until he pays the advance back, and then he starts paying you. That ain't going to happen. If you get a publisher, you're not going to see much in the way of royalties unless you happen to be a person with a huge reputation, a Hollywood star, or a big criminal, or maybe a politician. They're kind of the same, aren't they? Yeah. Anyway, you might, maybe if you're Prince Harry, he sold more books on his first day than had ever been sold before in history. But the typical writer, either publish it yourself or go to somebody like Fresh Ink Group. Fresh Ink Group is, I can unreservedly recommend you guys. You do a great job, and the end result is professional and beautiful, and you sell books. Bottom line is, don't quit. Get some help. You need an editor, and don't let any of the big boys take it away from you.
Good advice.
Yeah. Now, how can people contact you? And you've got a newsletter. I get it every week. How can they subscribe to your newsletter?
Go to my website, robertwilliscroft.com. You'll have a pop-up that gives you the opportunity. It'll even get annoying because every time you go there, it pops up again. But you can sign up. You'll get a free ebook if you sign up to my newsletter.
Cool.
Oh, cool.
robertwilliscroft.com.
robertwilliscroft.com. All right.
Yep. And any other social media handles, Facebook, Twitter, any of that kind of stuff?
Well, I'm on all the various ones. Twitter, I'm at RG Williscroft. I'm not sure what my handle is on Facebook, but if you just type in Robert Williscroft, you'll find me. Yeah. I don't do much on Instagram. I'm on the other little Twitter competitors like Gab and Parler and Truth, the one that Trump came out with. I'm on all those, but not much happens there.
Are you on Quora?
Oh yeah, I'm a big player on Quora.
Okay.
I've had let me see. The numbers are approximate, but I have something like 75,000 entries, answers, or responses of one type or another, and several million views.
Oh, that's pretty good.
All right. Yeah.
Lots of upvotes and stuff.
Yeah, I just posted today. People, for some reason, people are talking about rising oceans due to climate change, and that is so much BS. NASA says maybe in the last 10 years the oceans have risen by 3 millimeters. Give me a break. If you've ever been out on the ocean, you got waves that are several meters. You cannot measure 3 millimeters. It is not physically possible. You got winds, persistent winds that'll pile up oceans against one side of an ocean basin or the other side, so that you can't just use tide gauges. And you got solar tides and lunar tides and storms. The ocean levels haven't changed in 1,000 years, and they're not going to change for several more thousand years in the foreseeable future. And it's just, so I've been trying to get people to understand this in such a way that they don't feel stupid.
Right.
Well, Robert, it's been great having you on the show again. We're almost out of time here, so we're going to have to wrap this up. But, maybe as soon as you get that next Mac McDowell Mission book or the next Orc Chronicles book out, we'll be able to ask you about the fire at the South Pole or why the panic about the ozone hole is your fault.
The next book I come out with will be the third Orc Chronicle. It's called A Rising Tide.
A Rising Tide, a Andromeda, Rising Tide. Okay, great. All right. We want to thank our callers tonight. We didn't get much activity on Twitter this time. It's funny how that kind of ebbs and wanes, but we're looking forward to having everybody back next week. Thanks for the support of the show, and thanks for being on the show, Robert.
Yep, my pleasure.
Now we got a couple of people coming up in the coming weeks here. Let me flip over to my last page here. Let's see. Oh, these pages are out of order. What is it? Next week is the Herndons, right? Yeah.
Next week is the Herndons.
Next week we got Mark Herndon and Leah Seawright. They're going to be talking about their experiences in Myrtle Beach and him being inducted into the South Carolina Music Hall of Fame. And then after that?
After that, we've got Kristen Howard. She's a Christian writer and a speaker, and she's going to stop by and tell us about her book. And after that,
yeah, she's in Tennessee. She's got some very cool stuff. I've read some of her stuff. Like C.J. Peterson is going to be our guest in 3 weeks.
And after that is one of our favorite people, Gwen M. Plano. We'll be welcoming her back. So tune in for that. She's always a fun interview and entertaining, always entertaining. So.
Yeah. All right. Thanks again, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Have a good
thanks, Robert.
Yeah, thanks, Robert. And everybody have a good rest of your week.
You've been a part of Voice of Indy, a production of Fresh Ink Group. Spread the word, support our guests, then find us at freshinkgroup.com and be sure to hashtag Fresh Ink Group.